Hello. In this video, we are going to discuss Chapter 10, the agreement, and it's the offer. So when we talk about the agreement and contracts, we're talking about an offer and acceptance. And when you have those two, you have an agreement, okay? And so what we want to talk about is who is involved in this. Well, the offeror is the party who makes the offer. They are the ones that set the terms. We call them the master of the contract because they pretty much get to determine up front, hey, this is the terms of the agreement. And the offeree is the person who it's made to. Okay? Now, offer is the first element we have to have for a valid contract. And we can't just make it easy and say, hey, once you have an offer, you got that nailed down. We have to define it as well into elements. So there's three. Okay, we need intent, we need definiteness, and we need communicated. The first is the present intent. What does that mean? That means that the person who offer, you look at that from a reasonable person standard and you say, would we believe in that person's, from a reasonable person, that the person who's making the offer actually meant it? Okay. So if I say to you, you know what, if you're right, I'll eat my hat. And most people are going to think, okay, it's not reasonable to think that I'm actually offering to eat my hat, right? So you need to look from the person's perspective. But that also means if I put my hands behind my back and I cross my fingers and I say, I really want to sell you my car for $5,000. Would you like it? And you go, yes, I would like it. And I say, oh, I'm just kidding. Well, the problem with that is it's not whether I feel like I'm kidding or not, because guess what? Anybody could get on the stand and say, oh, I never made that offer to them. It was a joke, so we didn't have a contract. So we look at it from a reasonable person standard, and we call that objective standard. The next sub-element of offer is definiteness. Okay, definiteness means what do we have to have in the offer to determine that it's actually a valid offer? If I say, I'd like to sell you my car, well, we're missing price, right? We're missing time for payment. We're missing delivery. This is not really going to be a definite offer at this point. And common law, now this is where there's a difference. We are talking about things in common law like real estate, right? Services or uh, intellectual property, okay? You had to be, it was very strict. You had to have all the important terms, okay? If you didn't, it didn't consist of an offer. The UCC has done what they call gap filling provisions. And if we are working between two merchants and one makes an offer and the other accepts, you may be missing things such as price, quantity, delivery, time for payment. But the UCC says, you know what, we're still going to consider that an offer, but we're going to fill in the gaps with what we would expect would be the reasonable amount of time, or what normally would be a time, quantity, delivery, or time or price. So that's one difference there. So if we're talking about a house or we're talking about intellectual property or services, we're going to have those things in there. How much? Uh, what what are the terms? But if we're talking between merchants about buying something, it's going to be a little lax, and we're going to have gap filling provisions. Okay. The final thing is it has to be communicated, and that communication has to show an intent to be bound. If I don't communicate the offer to you, but I intend to make the offer, and it's definite, and I talk to someone about it, it's not an offer until I actually communicate it to you. It's easy to figure out what an offer is sometimes by looking at what an offer isn't, okay? Advertisements, they are treated as invitations to offer. Now, rewards, those are offers for you, meaning, so advertisements meaning I'm not making you an offer. I'm asking you to come in and buy that. And by coming in, you're making an offer to me, and I accept your offer when I take your payment. Okay? Rewards, those are valid offers, but They're not accepted until the offeree performs the act. Remember, that's a unilateral contract. Auctions, that's again treating as making an invitation to offer. When is there an offer? The offer is when you put your hand up and say, I want to pay this much. So even though the auctioneer is the one saying 10, 20, 15, la, 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 right? As soon as you put your hand up for one of those dollars, you're making an offer to them. And when the auctioneer puts his gavel down, that's the acceptance. Bids, advertisement for bids are also treating as invitations to offer. The actual person who submits the bid is the offerer. So when I'm asking for bids, that's not the offer. But when I put my bid in, that's the offer. When I'm the auctioneer, that's not the offer. It's the person who puts their hand up, right? And rewards, though, the offerer is the person who puts the reward out there. An advertisement, again, is just asking someone to come in and make an offer to them. So the last thing I want to talk about are terms of offer. The offeree has a duty to read the agreement. You cannot use that as an excuse for a breach of contract. But the offeree is only bound to the terms in which they actually have actual or reasonable notice. So terms of the offer are important, and you need to make sure that you understand those as the offeree. And I lied, I have another thing I want to cover. I want to cover about, let's say I made an offer. When does that offer, when is it no longer existent? And that's termination. So one way is if I'm the offerer, I told you I'm the master of the offer. I can tell you, hey, I'll keep this open for you till tomorrow, or this offer is good until Friday. Also, if I don't tell you as the offer and a reasonable amount of time goes by, then the lapse of time would terminate it. Now, the other way is if at common law, meaning I'm talking about a real estate, remember, or services or intellectual property, if at that point the offeree makes material changes to what I have offered, it becomes a counter offer. And once it's a counter offer, your offer or whoever offers terminates, and now the offeree is the offerer. Another way is if the offer is still out there and death or mental incapacity of the party. Obviously, there's no offer then. Destruction of subject matter. If I say I want to sell you my car and it gets destroyed, that's going to automatically terminate an offer. And then if we have an intervening illegality, let's say I am in a business and I'm going to ship a bunch of stuff overseas, but now there is some kind of ban on that. Well, I can't do that, so the offer before you even accept it is terminated. Okay? Why is this important? Because unless one of these termination of offers occur, if the offeree accepts, the offer is bound. So you need to remember that if that offer is still out there, the offerer has to accept the offeree's acceptance if one of these things don't occur. Now, revocation occurs is prior to acceptance, the offerer can pull that back. Okay? So let's say one of those things haven't terminated. The offer, I can pull it back unless there is an options contract. And what an options contract says, hey, I have this side deal that I will keep this open for you if you pay me an additional $20 or earnest money or something, right? Then I cannot revoke it. Offers for unilateral contracts. Once someone has started substantially performing, then we cannot do that. We cannot take that offer back. If somebody's walking up to my door with my dog, I can't say all of a sudden I revoke the offer. Okay? We're going to talk about promissory estoppel at a later point, but that prevents me from just revoking offers. But really, it's a remedy for me So we're going to talk about that later. So we have option contracts, and option contracts at the top are basically common law. So if it's goods, or I'm sorry, if it's services or real estate or intellectual property, I can say, hey, if you want to pay me X of dollars, earnest money or something to keep it open till this date, I have to. In the UCC, when we're talking the sale of goods, if we're working between merchants, another merchant without giving any additional, what we call consideration, additional money, and that's what consideration, exchange of something of benefit. If a merchant signs that they will keep the offer open to another merchant, they must do that for that amount of time. They cannot revoke it. So these are basically the exceptions to when you can revoke it. So we have all these things that terminate offers, and if they're not terminating, you can still pull your offer off the table. However, there are exceptions when you can pull it off the table. And if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me.